The security guard's hands were rough when they grabbed Drive. Miriam Chen's arms, yanking her from C-12B with a force that made her shoulder crack audibly. Her reading glasses flew off, clattering somewhere under the seats, and the medical journal she'd been studying scattered its pages like wounded birds down the narrow airplane aisle. She didn't resist, didn't fight back, because after 36 hours on her feet in a rural Sudanese field hospital, after watching 3 children die from preventable diseases, after using her own money to buy antibiotics because the supply chain had failed again, Miriam Chen was simply too exhausted to do anything but let herself be dragged. "Please," she said quietly, her voice hoarse from dehydration. "I have a patient waiting. I'm a doctor. I need to get to Boston. Ma'am, you need to exit the aircraft now." The guard's voice was mechanical, rehearsed. "You've been randomly selected for removal due to overbooking." Miriam's mind struggled to process the words. Random, selected, removed. She'd checked in on time, had her boarding pass, had already been seated for 20 minutes when they'd made the announcement asking for volunteers to give up their seats. She'd stayed silent then, thinking of James, her James, lying in Massachusetts General's ICU with stage 4 pancreatic cancer, asking for her, needing her. "I'm a physician with Doctors Without Borders," she tried again, reaching for her bag, for identification, for something to make them see her as human. "My husband is dying. I haven't seen him in 4 months. Please, I'll pay extra, all. Security matter, ma'am, please don't make this difficult." But it was already difficult. It was impossible, because as the guard pulled her toward the exit, as other passengers watched with their phones raised and their faces frozen in that peculiar mixture of horror and excitement that comes from witnessing someone else's humiliation, Miriam felt something inside her chest crack open. Not her heart, that had been breaking slowly for months. Every time James's voice on their satellite calls got weaker, every time he said, "It's okay, help the people who need you, I'll still be here when you get back," even though they both knew he might not be. No, what cracked open was something harder and colder. Her belief that if you did good work, if you sacrificed everything, if you saved lives and slept on dirt floors and held dying children and gave until you had nothing left to give, the universe might show you some small mercy in return. They dragged her through the terminal like a criminal. Not walked, dragged, her feet stumbling over the industrial carpet, her scrubs, she hadn't even had time to change out of her scrubs, disheveled and stained with rust-colored patches that might have been dirt or might have been blood or might have been both. People stared, a child pointed, a woman whispered to her companion, and Miriam caught the words, drunk, and drugs, and wanted to scream that she was sober, that she'd been sober through 36 hours of surgery and death and impossible choices, that she was more sober than she'd ever wanted to be. They left her at the gate. Just left her there with her bag and her scattered dignity and a gate agent who wouldn't meet her eyes as she explained that Miriam could take the next available flight in 18 hours. 18 hours. James might not have 18 hours. Miriam stood there, swaying slightly, and pulled out her phone with shaking hands. The screen showed 43 missed calls. 43. She knew what that meant before she even checked the voicemails. But she checked anyway, because hope was a disease she couldn't cure, and played the first one. "Miriam, it's Rachel." Her sister-in-law's voice was thick with tears. "James is asking for you. They've moved him to comfort care. You need to come home. Please come home." The next message, "Miriam, where are you? The flight tracker says you took off but now it says you're still in Frankfurt." Then, "The doctors say maybe 48 hours. Maybe less. He keeps saying your name. God, Miriam, please." The final message was just crying. Miriam stood at gate B37 in Frankfurt International Airport and made a sound that wasn't quite human. It came from the same place as the cracking feeling in her chest, from the accumulation of every impossible choice, every patient she couldn't save, every night James had eaten dinner alone, every birthday and anniversary and ordinary Tuesday she'd missed while she was somewhere else saving someone else's husband, someone else's father, someone else's love. She called the airline, was transferred 6 times, spoke to representatives who read scripts about policy and procedures and how sorry they were for any inconvenience. She explained about James, about the cancer, about how she'd been gone for 4 months because there was an outbreak and children were dying and she couldn't just leave. About how she'd finally gotten on this flight, finally been on her way home, and they'd dragged her off like she was nothing. "I understand your frustration, ma'am," the voice on the phone said, managing to sound both sympathetic and completely indifferent. "But our hands are tied. It's policy. Your policy is killing my husband. Miriam's voice cracked. Several travelers turned to stare. I'm a doctor. I save lives. I've saved hundreds of lives. And you're telling me I can't get on a plane to see my husband before he dies because of policy? The next available flight departs at 11:47 a.m. tomorrow. I can confirm your seat on that. Miriam hung up. She stood there in her stained scrubs, in the middle of one of Europe's busiest airports, and felt the full weight of her exhaustion crash over her like a wave. She'd been running on adrenaline and necessity for so long that she'd forgotten what it felt like to stop. To have nothing left. To be defeated not by disease or disaster but by bureaucracy and indifference and the casual cruelty of systems that saw humans as numbers, as cargo to be optimized, as problems to be solved through algorithms instead of compassion. She should go find a hotel. Should try to sleep. Should call Rachel back and tell her that she'd tried, that she was coming, that she'd be there as soon as she could even though they both knew it wouldn't be soon enough. Instead, she opened her phone and scrolled through her contacts until she found a name she hadn't called in years. David Morrison. Her college roommate's husband, a man who'd spent their entire friendship trying to convince Miriam to invest in his hedge fund, to let him put her money to work, even though she'd never had money to invest, had always chosen the nonprofit path, the service path, the path that paid in purpose instead of dollars. But David had mentioned something once, years ago, at a dinner party. Something about his fund's major stake in an airline consortium. Something Miriam had filed away and forgotten because it wasn't relevant to her life of vaccines and surgery and sleeping in tents. It was 3 a.m. in New York. She called anyway. David answered on the fourth ring, his voice thick with sleep. Miriam, is that you? Are you okay? I need your help. The words came out broken. I need you to tell me the truth about something. Your fund, it has holdings in airlines, right? International carriers. Miriam, what's going on? Where are you? She told him, all of it, the field hospital, the flight, the dragging, James, the 18 hours that might as well be 18 years because time meant different things when someone you loved was dying. She told him about the representative reading scripts about policy while her husband's cells multiplied and destroyed him. She told him about standing in this airport feeling more helpless than she'd felt in a Sudanese refugee camp with no antibiotics and too many patients and not enough hands. David was quiet for a long moment. Then, our fund has a significant position in Transglobal Airlines Consortium. Not controlling, but substantial. About $4 billion in committed capital for their expansion project. Can you stop it? What? The funding. Can you freeze it? Can you make them hurt the way they've hurt me? Miriam's voice was steady now, cold with purpose. Can you make them understand that I'm not just a number? That my husband isn't just an inconvenience? That there are consequences to treating people like cargo? Miriam, that's not how this works. There are contracts, legal obligations, other investors. I'm not asking about how it works. I'm asking if you can do it. Just for 48 hours. Just long enough to get their attention. Just long enough to make them see me. She was crying now, silent tears that ran down her face and dripped onto her scrubs. David, I have given everything. Everything. I've spent my entire adult life helping people, saving people, being where I'm needed instead of where I want to be. And today, right now, I need to be with my husband before he dies. I need that, and they dragged me off a plane because of overbooking, because I wasn't worth anything to them, because policy matters more than people. So I'm asking you, as someone who claims to be my friend, if you can make them feel even a fraction of what I'm feeling right now. The silence stretched. Miriam could hear David breathing, could imagine him sitting up in bed, running his hand through his hair the way he always did when he was thinking. If I do this, he finally said, if I convince our fund to freeze the commitment, it won't be quiet. It'll be news. There'll be questions, investigations, legal action. It could hurt my career. It could. Your career. Miriam laughed, a sound like breaking glass. James's career was teaching literature to high school kids. He loved Whitman. Every year, he'd do this unit on Song of Myself, and half the kids would roll their eyes but a few would really get it, would understand what Whitman was saying about containing multitudes, about being vast and contradictory and human. And James would come home so excited about those kids, about the ones who got it. That was his career, and he gave it up, gave up the parts of it that mattered, when I kept taking these positions overseas, when I kept leaving him alone, when I kept choosing other people over him. And he never complained, not once. He just said, go save lives, I'll be here when you get back. Her voice broke completely, but he won't be there, David. He's dying, and I can't get to him because of policy. So I don't care about your career. I don't care about contracts or investments or any of it. I just want to get home. Another silence. Then, give me 2 hours. Miriam sat on the terminal floor with her back against the wall. She didn't have the energy to find a chair. Around her, the airport slowly came to life as dawn approached, shops opening their gates, travelers hauling luggage, the smell of expensive coffee and cheap pastries. Normal people living normal lives, catching flights to normal destinations, experiencing normal inconveniences that didn't involve watching their husband die from across an ocean. Her phone rang 90 minutes later. David's number. It's done, he said. Our fund has officially frozen all committed capital to the Transglobal Consortium pending review of their customer service practices and treatment protocols. The announcement went out 20 minutes ago. Their stock is already down 4%. Their CEO is probably getting calls from very angry board members right about now. Miriam felt nothing, no triumph, no satisfaction, just emptiness. Will it help? Will they let me on a plane? Their head of passenger experience called me directly. 10 minutes ago. Somehow they connected the dots, probably because one of those viral videos from the plane has your name visible on your bag. They're looking for you. They want to apologize. They want to offer you. I don't want an apology. I want to go home. There's a direct flight to Boston departing in 40 minutes. Gate C22. You're booked in first class. They've held the departure. Miriam, they've held an entire airplane for you. She should have felt something then. Relief, maybe, or vindication, but she just felt tired. So impossibly tired. Gate C22 was in the international terminal. Miriam walked there slowly, her bag dragging behind her. When she arrived, there was a woman in an expensive suit waiting, flanked by 2 other airline officials. They rushed toward her with apologies spilling from their mouths like water from a broken dam. Dr. Chen, we are so deeply sorry. There was a terrible misunderstanding. A catastrophic failure of our systems and training. We want to make this right. We're prepared to offer you. Is the plane ready? Miriam interrupted. Yes, but if we could just take a moment to. Is the plane ready? The woman's face fell. Yes, it's boarding now. We've reserved seat 2A for you. Anything you need. Miriam walked past them, just walked past, onto the jet bridge, onto the plane. A flight attendant tried to take her bag but Miriam held it tighter. She found her seat and collapsed into it. The leather was soft. There was champagne waiting. None of it mattered. The flight took 7 hours and 43 minutes. Miriam didn't sleep, didn't eat, didn't watch movies or read or do any of the things people do on long flights. She just sat there, her hand resting on her phone, waiting for it to ring, praying it wouldn't ring, because if it rang it meant news, and news at this point could only be one thing. It didn't ring. When they landed at Logan, there was a car waiting. Someone had arranged the two. The driver knew without being told where she needed to go. Massachusetts General Hospital, ICU, 4th floor. Rachel was in the waiting room. She looked up when Miriam came in, her face wet with tears, and Miriam knew. She knew before Rachel stood up, before Rachel opened her mouth, before Rachel said the words that would split Miriam's life into before and after. I'm sorry, he's gone. He died 2 hours ago. He held on as long as he could. He kept asking if you were close. He wanted. Rachel's voice dissolved into sobs. Miriam didn't cry, couldn't cry. She just stood there in her stained scrubs, in this hospital that smelled like antiseptic and death, and felt the final piece of her heart crack away. Can I see him? They let her into his room. James looked small in the hospital bed. Peaceful. Someone had closed his eyes and folded his hands and done all the terrible gentle things nurses do to make death look less like death. Miriam sat beside him and took his hand. It was still warm, almost warm. I tried, she whispered. I tried so hard to get here. I stopped a $4 billion deal. I made them see me. I made them hurt. I did everything I could. Her voice broke, but I was still too late. I'm always too late. She sat there for an hour. Maybe more, holding his hand, telling him about Sudan, about the children she'd saved, about the outbreak they'd contained, about all the reasons she'd been gone. All the justifications that meant nothing now. All the lives she'd saved that didn't matter because she'd lost the one life that mattered most. Eventually, Rachel came in, sat beside her, put an arm around her shoulders. He knew you loved him, Rachel said softly. He knew you were trying to get here. He wasn't angry. Even at the end, he wasn't angry. He wanted you to know he understood. That he was proud of you. That all the kids whose lives you saved, they mattered too. That you made the right choice, even if it was the hardest one. Miriam finally cried then, deep, wrenching sobs that came from the same place as the crack in her chest, from the place where love and loss and sacrifice tangled together into something too painful to examine. She cried for James, for the children in Sudan, for the life she'd chosen and the life she'd lost, for the impossible mathematics of loving more than one thing, of being needed in more than one place, of having to choose who to save when you couldn't save everyone. The story broke the next day. Doctor dragged from plane, freezes billions in airline funding. It went viral. Think pieces, outrage, congressional hearings about airline passenger rights. The airline CEO resigned. Policies changed. Miriam became a symbol of resistance, of standing up to corporate indifference, of the power of one person to force accountability. But Miriam didn't care about any of it. She went back to work 3 weeks after James's funeral. Back to Doctors Without Borders. Back to field hospitals and impossible choices. Because that's what she knew how to do. Save people, help people, be where she was needed even when it cost everything. She just carried the cost differently now. Carried James with her in every choice, every patient, every life she saved that he'd never meet. Carried the knowledge that there are no right answers when love demands you be in two places at once. Only choices, hard choices, choices that crack you open and remake you into something harder and softer all at once. And sometimes, late at night in her tent, she'd think about that moment in the Frankfurt airport. About standing there broken and exhausted and deciding to fight back the only way she knew how. About whether freezing $4 billion had made any real difference, whether it had changed anything important, whether revenge against indifference could ever equal the sweetness of one more hour with someone you loved. She never found an answer. Just kept working, kept saving lives, kept carrying James and all the contradictions of loving in a world that demanded you choose between the one and the many, between staying and going, between the heart that needed you and the hands that could heal. And that was enough. It had to be enough. Because there was nothing else.